plug in?
Yeah.
Okay. I adjust that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the last talk for today will be Aram-Alexandre Pooladian, who is a postdoc at Yale. He did his PhD with John L. Swede at NYU. He works in the union of optimal transport, sampling, diffusion models, and today he's going to tell us about trajectory inference.
Awesome.
Take it away.
Thanks, Andre. And thanks for the invitation and for the very kind workshop. This has been really, so far, a really wonderful past 2 days. Seeing a lot of friendly and familiar friends and faces. So I'm going to be talking about some recent work, and the title is it's a bit general. It's a new class of algorithms for trajectory inference. If you're unfamiliar with the trajectory inference problem, I hope to introduce you to it today. This is joint work with some great co-authors. If you're not familiar with the lovely Alain Durmu at Polytechnique, Giovanni Conforti and Bartolo Dazzini are at the University of Padua. Great. So we've been kind of talking about the generative modeling problem for the last couple of days, but I want to stress that there's a bunch of different problems that might occur in this kind of space. And the one that we've kind of focused on a lot has been the following. Given x1, xn IID data from some distribution, generate new meaningful samples from the data distribution. So as a particular example, maybe you're one of the lucky few people and you have photos of Sino and I in samurai outfits. Right, and your task, your mission in life is to maybe generate a new one like this one. Okay, so this is I would say the simplest generative modeling problem. And the way that people do this typically is they're going to learn a transformation from the standard Gaussian to the data itself. Right, and there's many different ways you can go about doing this. We've seen so many different things over the last 10 years or so that I've been reading these kinds of papers. You've had GANs, you've had normalizing flows, and finally we have diffusion models. Okay, and we've kind of decided this is the best thing on the planet. And these are basically just, as we've discovered or discussed many times, this is a scheme where if you can figure out how to compute the score function, then all you have to do is simulate the stochastic differential equation in reverse time. Okay, and thankfully this last bit is easy to do because of Tweedy's formula and the magic of U-nets and all this other good stuff. Okay, so let's take that for granted. Now here's a slightly different generative modeling problem. Now I'm given x1 to xn from a distribution p0, y1 to yn, sorry, rho 0 and rho 1. And I want to generate a sample from rho 1 given a new random draw from rho 0. Right, and this is slightly different. So it's the same thing as before. If rho 0 is the Gaussian, then there's no difference. But now I want to stress that this is really a kind of either data translation problem or a distribution alignment problem, whatever you want to think about it. Right, and this is significantly different. And so again, you want to learn a transformation from the two distributions. And you can do this using optimal transport maps, or also you can use the stochastic interpolant framework. Of course, I love my optimal transport maps, but today I'll be talking about, or first reviewing quickly stochastic interpolants. Okay, and also feel free to ask me any questions at any point in time. Yeah.
The x's and the y's are supposed to be paired here, like xi and y.
No, these are IID. There's no pairing.
Just
Yeah, just IID draws. Yeah, exactly, right.
Is this not underspecified then? Like, what should I think of? Like,
yeah, so it's just like before, it is underspecified, but you can still impose some transformation that you're going to learn. That's right, exactly. Yeah. So here, crucially unpaired. If it's paired, it's
It doesn't have to be n, right? Two n's don't have to be equal.
No, not at all. No. I'm just making everyone's life easier. Yeah, great. So just a brief recap on stochastic interpolants. We have our two distributions here. These are the IID data. And the core mechanism is the following. You're going to draw from a coupling that you choose. So pi is the set of, capital Pi is the set of couplings between the two distributions. Draw the 2 points as you want. And for simplicity, just always pick, whenever I say choose a coupling, it'll always be the independent coupling. This is the easiest one to pick. So you pick the 2 points at random. You choose an interpolant that you care about. So I think we maybe saw this earlier this week. So alpha t and beta t satisfy some conditions. Maybe you introduce some noise through C, and you have sigma t is the amount of noise. But regardless, you're going to choose some path that you care about. Paradigmatically, you can choose just 1 minus tx0 and times tx1. This is just a standard straight line path. Now you compute the time derivative of this path. You get a conditional velocity. And the whole magic of stochastic interpolance, flow matching, et cetera, is you're going to learn a conditional velocity that's trying to approximate this conditional expectation. Right, so this is I'm very bad with including citations, but this is done independently by Qiang Liu's group, Eric van den Eyden, Michael Albergo, and Yaron Lipman, Ricky Chen at Meta and stuff. So this goes back to 2023. And this is super doable in the same way that diffusion models are doable because you get a very nice regression-like objective, and this is super easy to train. Okay. To generate data, you take a new sample x0 from row 0, and you're just going to simulate the ordinary differential equation from this velocity. And you know from optimality that if you've trained v theta sufficiently well, then you know that you'll arrive at row 1 as planned. Okay, assuming no discretization error, all that good stuff. Let's just forget about that. Okay. So now I'm going to introduce, this is background. I'm going to introduce a problem that arises in computational biology, and in particular was pioneered by, maybe not pioneered by Jeff Schiebinger when he was at MIT, and Charlotte Buna and many other people have worked on this since then to develop some nice mathematical and computational theories for this problem, and why the first two things don't fit into this framework. So let's say we have a patient. Patient's name is Bobby, and Bobby is sick. And we want to try to figure out what kind of medications we're going to give to the patient, right? And so what we can do, thankfully, is if we can, using very sophisticated single-cell RNA sequencing, microscopy, and all these other technologies, we can actually investigate and get cells from the patient, maybe a collection of patients across many different cohorts, and we can actually, measure the genetic information of the patient at a particular time, and this gives us maybe a density rho t0. Okay, this is at a particular time. And of course, okay, this is the United States. We ask what kind of medication can we give the patient. Should we give this kind of drug, that kind of drug, this? And then we investigate. So we give some medication. And then Bobby, some time passes. This is now time t1. And we do the same thing. We can measure the cells. We kill them. We get new data. And then we do this over and over again until finally the patient's much better. Right? And so the whole point of this procedure is the following, is that at every point you have to kill the cells at these different time points, so you never observe the same cell more than once. So nevertheless, the population of cells in the patient is going to evolve over time, and so you're faced with obtaining just static snapshots of the evolution of the one patient or many, many patients. And this is kind of how you can imagine you're going to do some kind of personalized medicine or drug discovery and things of that nature. Okay? And now, of course, you have a new patient and you want to try to figure out what to do. And so if you have samples from the row 0 again, row t0, then you can kind of best see what kind of drugs to prescribe, because you'll have a better understanding of the trajectories that everything took forth. Okay, yes? Let's say single cell. Yeah, yeah. Great. Mm-hmm.
So the drug is fixed and patient?
This is just an illustration. I will not talk about the specifics of this kind of thing. But yeah, this is just to motivate the problem. Yeah. I'm not a biologist. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't see the connection with your setup because you pick.
Just give one more second.
You pick those pairs randomly, right?
Yeah, wait till the next slide.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, great. So here's the problem. So now I have the problem that I care about is a sequence of unpaired marginals at different times, and I want to learn how to interpolate the entire path, not just time 0 to time 1, but I care about all the independent marginals. And that's how it's the same thing as before. Does that answer the question?
But I'll wait more.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe this is neither here nor there from the point of view of like the math, but why do you care about the entire trajectory? Like you just care about if the patient gets better or not.
Thankfully I watched a talk by Charlotte yesterday, so I can prime myself for these questions. I think the conventional wisdom is basically that you actually want the future data to influence what's going to happen at the beginning, right? There is some kind of natural, maybe non-Markovianness to the trajectories that are going to be taken. This is just the underlying hypothesis, right? Yeah. I mean, you can imagine that especially if you're undergoing some kind of treatment that maybe having future information might dictate what you should do at the beginning, for example. Yeah. Again, this is a mathematical framework, but yeah. And so I motivated this through the computational biology lens, but there are many applications that you can imagine: economics, astronomy, fluid simulations, and video generation. All these different problems where you really do care about the whole sequence of things. You just have unpaired observations. Right. Great. So broadly, this is called trajectory inference. And so here's maybe how you can imagine Bobby's DNA footprint at the different times t0, t1, t2, and t3. And these are just Gaussians. Okay? And so here I'm going to start with the 4 black, maybe new data that I care about. And then you can just think philosophically, maybe because we're humans and not AI, how would you interpolate or fit between these marginal distributions? Well, what would you maybe think is maybe the most natural and ideal thing? And we'll come back to what we're going to do. OK, so let's think about some naive solutions. Does anyone have an incredibly naive way to solve this problem? If nobody answers, I will ask a friend. That's OK. I will do it myself. It's fine. The most naive solution possible is, of course, to learn J separate transport maps. Right? So if I didn't give you any other context for the problem, if nobody asks why do I care about future trajectories, just learn J separate transport maps, or learn J separate flows. Okay, then you will create something that matches all of the marginal distributions. You can learn these in any way that you want. Okay? The other way that you can maybe think about doing this, if you're maybe more ML inclined, or if you ask, like maybe a first-year machine learning grad student or GPT, you can actually do this with just a single vector field, right? So if I go through the stochastic interpolative framework and I just maybe condition on the interval that I'm on during my training algorithm, then you can actually just get some velocity field and just integrate. Or you could even be smarter and probably not even include the index in your algorithm, and you can still just generate some meaningful vector field. Okay? So what happens if you do this? So you can type this into Claude Code, and then you'll just get something that looks like this. Okay, so this is not an illustration. This is actual Python code made into a GIF. So then you know this is legit. Okay. Right. So what's happening here is that there are non-smooth jumps between the different marginals as it's switching. Right. So if I asked you again, what would you maybe want as your ideal kind of trajectory for these kinds of problems? Maybe you included this. I would think of this if I was in a very angry mood. I'd just be like, I want to go like this. But in reality, I think the desiderata for myself and for a lot of people in this space are threefold. You want to have a computationally efficient algorithm like what we saw before. You want something that matches all the marginals. But I think at the end of the day, from a mathematical perspective, you want smooth trajectories. You want smooth dynamics. Okay? And maybe to illustrate, you want maybe something that looks like this, with ideally no more or no less compute than what you had before. So I would naturally think of something like this. Yeah?
Do you want any instance on this?
For now, let's just say any. Yeah. In the same way that stochastic interpolants are any interpolant, right? OK, so I'm interested in something like this. Okay. Any other? Because we're going to go into the details.
Why are you not interested in the line?
Let's just say I do care about smooth dynamics for various reasons.
Because line is very smooth, except at that point that the regression.
Yeah. Well, I think that's maybe the whole point, right? Yeah. I'm setting up the math problem to want smooth dynamics.
Okay.
Yes.
I thought your answer was going to be, I presume somehow there's some identifiability type of question that if you knew that the ground truth dynamics have like some smoothness in them, presumably in the limit of like, infinite.
So we don't investigate this because by default the trajectory inference problem has very little identifiability, like.
At the distribution level though? Like
yeah.
Even at the distribution level?
If you only have the marginals, I don't see how you can, unless you pre-specify what the trajectory comes from. If I just give you marginals, you don't really have any other information. So you might as well impose, like, I'd rather just like it to be smooth. But we don't make these kinds of things, but you can imagine doing this, yeah. Yeah. exactly. Great. I mean, most things are better when they're smooth. The exceptions are maybe brains. And otherwise, most things are usually better when they're smooth, right? So maybe that's my best answer that I have. Yeah. Okay. So let's go through these desiderata, and I think it's actually kind of funny. I listed them in 1, 2, 3, but we're going to actually go in reverse order. So we're going to talk about how to impose smooth dynamics, and then go on our way up. Great. Good on time. All right. So the approach that we're going to take, the very maybe not so intuitive or intuitive approach, is we're going to lift to what's called phase space. So those that are unfamiliar, the idea is the following. Typically, we have, as we saw before, like our dynamics, if they're just given by an ordinary differential equation, so xt is a function of vt xt, then if nu is the law of xt, then I have the continuity equation, and I know that I can just, these are the dynamics that govern that system of equations. When I say lift to phase space, I'm trying to understand the following system of differential equations. I have that the xt evolves according to vt, so dxt is vt dt, and now I want the velocity to obey some kind of its own dynamics. So a sub t here should be thought of maybe as an acceleration field, right? And I still have Brownian motion, and now I'm just going to lift the Fokker-Planck equation just one level higher to include more dynamics. Right? Yeah, you can think of it like that too, yeah. But now there's no Langevin potential, but exactly, that's right. Yeah. And now I'm investigating the entire trajectory mu t, the mu t, which is the law of xt and vt jointly. Okay. And so just by design, these will induce at most C1 sample paths, just by doing the numerical integration. So smooth doesn't mean C infinity. I'm going to say smooth, I mean C1. Okay? And just as an example that you should keep in the back of your mind, kinetic Brownian motion is going to be the case where the acceleration is identically 0. And this is what I'll call this script R. Okay, so this is Brownian motion on the joint space, just R2D, let's say. Okay? And so the goal under this ill-specified, misspecified setting is to find the correct acceleration field that best works for this problem. Okay? So let's just say that is what the smooth dynamics are. I just don't know what exactly to do, because what I really care about is matching all the marginals at the different times. Right? So now, if I take any coupling, so I'll describe how this works. We're going to start by taking any coupling between the j marginals. And again, I want it to always be the independent coupling, but you can imagine it's going to be more general. And you fix the times t0, t1, all the way to tj. Okay? Now, you're going to define the following interpolation path, p superscript I, which is going to be a mixture of kinetic Brownian bridges, where I'm pinning them down at the particular x's that I'm randomly drawing for my coupling. Okay? So here, this is a path measure on R2D. So here, this is where this empty space is where the velocities go. Right? And so now I've basically created this maybe abstract interpolant, basically, on the lifted space. Okay? And if you recall, the whole point here is that I have an acceleration field that I care about that depends on both x and v simultaneously. But I only have positional data. Right? Bobby's DNA did not tell me what direction the cells were going. It only told me what exactly was the genetic information at that time. So I need to do some kind of magic. But we can actually artificially generate velocity data from what we have already. So there's a cute lemma that you can figure out, which says that if my initial data x0, v0 is drawn according to whatever I define as the initial distribution of the kinetic Brownian motion, and the initial velocity given the position at time 0 is itself a Gaussian, then for any future times, vt at the times, given xt is itself a Gaussian with some explicit mean and covariance. Maybe just to illustrate what the point of this is, it's just saying that if I have my Gaussian, so this doesn't have to be Gaussian marginals. if I have my marginals, I take the black dots as my random draws. I can compute velocities. These are the arrows indicated here for each of the points for free. So I know, because I know where they're going to go into the future, I can actually compute these velocities in closed form. And I can just sample them. Yeah?
So you're computing the velocities at the marginals, but not in between.
Wait. Yeah. For now, it's just at the marginals. That's right. Exactly. Yeah. So now I know at each point where they're going to go, given the current data. And of course, what happens in between the times. It's the natural next question. And that's given by this kind of big proposition, but it's actually quite simple to explain. So it turns out that if I pin down what happens at time tj and what happens at time tj plus 1, both the position and the velocity, if I take both of them, then the conditional distribution of the data is given by the following stochastic differential equation. So I'm going to basically, I'm saying that the distribution that I care about is given by this SDE, where the acceleration, the conditional acceleration field, is entirely explicit. And it only depends on the next future position and velocity, which you have access to. Right? So if you're at, yeah?
Maybe I missed it. If you're at a marginal, how do you know the next point you're going to do?
Because I drew all the points simultaneously from the training data.
And they're paired?
Independently.
Oh, OK.
Yeah, I drew all points. So the way the training algorithms work is you typically have access to all marginals simultaneously. You can couple them or not. But even if you have independent queries, you still have access to all information along the whole trajectory. Yeah.
But I think the proposition sequentially couple them, right?
Say it again?
I think in the proposition, you actually couple them from tj to tj plus 1.
So the x's are going to be independent.
Yeah, they're independent draw, but after you draw,
Yes, then they're coupled. Yeah, I agree.
when you learn the velocity field, they're coupled, right?
Yes, that's right. Exactly. Yes.
So when you draw the velocity from the marginal, is it just like another Gaussian that you've chosen arbitrarily? Because you don't have velocity information at the marginals, unless you're assuming that you do.
Say the last part of the question.
So the original problem, as I understood it, is that you just have position information at the
Yes.
marginals.
Yes.
But my understanding is that you've also drawn velocity when you go to the phase space.
Yep.
And you've assumed this is Gaussian.
I've assumed that if x0 and v0 are drawn from the initial distribution of R.
So you have
That's-
V0, or what is
So okay, I'll get to that point because that will come back later. Maybe wait a couple more slides and then ask you a question again. Yeah. Yeah. For now, this is you can think of this as a technicality that lets me actually do this, and then consequently this, just for now, and then we'll come back. Yeah. And the way you can prove this is in two stages. One is some Dubh transform calculation, and the second is a closed form density computation, which happens because we're assuming this kind of nice Gaussianity, right? In Vt given xt, right? Okay. Question?
So what is essentially you introduce this auxiliary V to get the smoothness? Is that the high level picture or?
Among other things, yeah. But we're not the only people to do this. We're the first people to do this. But lifting to phase space is like a very natural thing that some people considered. Yeah. Yeah. Great. And so here's an illustration of how you can actually visualize the acceleration. So the red arrows are the computed accelerations between the marginal points. And you can kind of see how it's kind of cool thinking about, you know that the arrows are supposed to go down because you know the velocity is supposed to go down afterwards and up and so on and so forth. So this is, this is just illustrative. Good. And so the main theorem, which is just stated informally, is the following. So now I can compute a Markovianization of this acceleration field. So I have a sequence of them, this piecewise acceleration field. I just compute the Markovianization as a conditional expectation under the interpolant path that I care about, right, following the stochastic interpolant recipe. If I can initialize from pi0, and I simulate this SDE, then indeed the main punchline is you can actually do this. You can say that the Markovian path, the law of XTM VTM in distribution is the same as that of the interpolation path. And you know the interpolation path is correct, which means that if I simulate this SDE, then I'm actually matching the marginal distributions at different times. Right. So this is just saying that we have a maybe not verifiable way, but you have an approach that defines the right acceleration field that solves the match all marginals problem. Okay? And now the very third bullet point is regarding computational efficiency. And this is where we arrive at what we call acceleration matching. This is a very, once you know the stochastic interpolant flow matching formula, it becomes quite clear how you're supposed to do this. So your AJs are defined piecewise on your intervals. Just learn a neural network A theta that predicts time, that takes it as input time xt vt, outputs something in RD, and then you just do regression. Very straightforward, right? And this is the natural objective because, right, this is just piecewise expectations. Right? And so how do you do this algorithmically? This happens in 4 steps. So step 1, you sample positions according to the coupling. Again, you sample them independently across all different knots. So you just take all of them like this. You sample velocities according to the reference process, given the positional knots. You sample from the interpolant, given the 2 endpoint knots, the beginning and end. You sample xt vt. And then you feed this into this objective where ATJ is closed form, A theta is your neural network, and then you just do gradient descent. So this is literally I would say maybe the correct extension of flow matching to this kind of case with multiple marginals. I have more evidence for this, but let's just leave the correct in quotes. This is the main algorithm. And here, the only complicated steps are maybe steps 2 and 3. But we're lucky because everything is going to become Gaussian. All the sampling steps are Gaussian, so in principle, these are all incredibly efficient. You can, yeah, exactly. So effectively, this is basically for free. Cool. Maybe the more interesting or complicated part is the sampling aspect of this procedure, which is related to, I think, what you were saying. So as you pointed out, the hard part here is if I have my initial distribution pi0, which I do not have. I only have access to information from x, not v. So what you can do is the following. You can obtain pairs x0, v0 from the reference process. So if you have all positions, you sample them, then you draw the velocities from the reference in the Gaussian way, and you only keep the initial velocity and the initial x. Then you have a proxy from which, and this can be done because it's Gaussian, then you can learn a conditional sampler using this paired data. Yeah.
So if I understand correctly, you sample x0 and v0 from the reference process, but how do you know that that x0 corresponds to that v0? Or you just assume this?
So I'm going to draw x0, x1 all the way to xj.
Sure.
Then I draw the velocity at time 0, and then I discard every other point except that pair.
I see.
And that defines a valid pair. And I have a prior on v0 that can be just something trivial like a Gaussian. And then I just going to learn a conditional sampler in this way. And this can be anything. We just use the simple Gaussian variational approximation, but in principle, this can be anything. But this is a much simpler problem given that everything is paired. You don't have to do anything fancy. This is a much, much simpler problem. And then you just roll out using any old numerical integrator on this phase space. Right? And this is how this is what we do. So this is all 3 desiderata, and this is how that that GIF with the smooth curves, that was exactly running this algorithm. I'm going to talk quickly about some alternatives that exist in the literature. There's a lot more. I'm only going to talk about 2 of them. Yeah.
So maybe I'm missing something. I'm a bit confused. So let's say the true trajectory is some jump process.
That's it. Then yeah.
There's no SE.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then you're observing like T0 and T1 is very extremely close.
Mm-hmm.
So what will happen in your algorithm? So there was no velocity field that can do
Right.
things like that.
Right.
And so
No, I mean we've not investigated other kinds of processes that you can cook up, but that is a very valid thing to think about. Yeah.
So I guess there are some assumptions in the theorem that prevent such scenarios. That I mean.
So I'm not trying to claim that what we're proving is the optimal thing to do. It's just to say that how you can lift, maybe I'm misunderstanding the question, but if you have the original stochastic interpolant framework, just having multiple marginals, what would be the natural kind of algorithm for solving the problem that matches the constraints? I'm not sure why this invalidates an algorithm that matches the marginals, even if it doesn't obey the true trajectory.
Yeah, I'm just wondering that is it true that given any slices of the density, there always exists a kinetic SDE like this to.
Okay, so right, maybe. So this is informal, right? This theorem. So I need to assume that the true ATM is well behaved, and then everything is uniquely defined. By well behaved, I mean I need it to be Lipschitz in X and V, and then everything is fine. Outside of this, we actually don't know what to do. Yeah. Yeah. Great. I'll quickly talk about two other papers. So one is called multi-sample flow matching. This was from last year. And here the idea is the following. I'm given a mini batch of data that I sample pairwise from the marginals. So let's say I compute the optimal transport pairing between my empirical data, rho T0, rho T1, rho T1, rho T2, et cetera, et cetera. And then I draw data from these. I'm going to compute the following interpolant, which is a cubic spline defined on the J knots. And I'm maybe going to add noise. Okay? So here, this incurs an additional runtime of Jn cubed just to compute the couplings. But this comes with 2 other problems that are not maybe the best. Number one is that we didn't include this in the paper, but I'm quite confident that this procedure does not always preserve the marginal coupling that you chose to begin with. That is to say that you can choose pairwise OT couplings, and then depending on the distribution itself, it actually outputs trajectories that don't obey this coupling that you prescribed in the first place. So this is maybe one knock for this. And number 2, this actually becomes quite expensive as the number of iterations increases. And I'll show some evidence for this in just a second. The main thing you can imagine is that computing cubic splines every iteration is maybe not the cheapest thing to do if you're doing many, many, many iterations. Right? At least according to the code that I ran. You could probably optimize it, but their code was very slow. So there's that. And then there's another paper that's called Momentum Multi-Marginal Schrödinger Bridges, so 3M SBM, also from last year. And they also lift to phase space, so they call this momentum. And so they regress onto the following conditional acceleration field. So it's this whole thing, where I cannot actually write down in one slide what these coefficients are, so I didn't. Here, the additional difficulty is, first, the algorithm requires simulations during training, so you have to go back and forth and all this other stuff. All these coefficients need to be computed by hand. So here, if j is bigger than 4, I actually don't know what to write next, like on paper. And this is incredibly computationally expensive. I was not able to reproduce their experiments or implement it myself, even with GPT 5.6 Pro. So I just didn't touch this. Okay. But this is like, people have thought about doing this, but I would say the novelty is a very easy conditional acceleration field that you can actually regress onto. I have a few minutes. This is either the best or worst part of any talk, depending on what community you're a part of. I have some numerical experiments. Fantastic. All you really need to think about here is, so here, OK, all the numbers are better, great, compared to everything that we implemented. Here you can just kind of visualize the trajectories over time, where we don't have access to additional pairings. We just really have access to the data and how you can visualize the trajectories a little bit better. Ours seem better than other people. Whatever, it's fine. You can, and these are two-dimensional experiments, which is a standard benchmark for this area. You can go to higher dimensional data sets. So there's 5-dimensional, 50-dimensional, 100-dimensional data sets from the single-cell sequencing community. Here, everything is relatively comparable. For some data sets, we're a little bit better. For some, we're a little bit worse. But ultimately, everything kind of looks the same. So I'm not entirely sure what the best metric to quantify our methods are. I do want to say, though, that our approach was 5 times faster to train than the 2 multi-marginal methods. And this is just because we do not compute these cubic splines at every single iteration. I can't speak for the other 2 methods because we didn't implement those from scratch. But that's the main idea. So just to recap the main idea, the main thesis for this talk, you can actually lift a phase space correctly and actually get an implementable algorithm that solves a multi-marginal problem, where you get these kind of C1 trajectories entirely for free, with no pre-processing, simulation-free. Everything is super nice. And it's, I would say, the natural extension of these stochastic interpolants for multiple marginals. You can imagine that there's a bunch of different questions that you can ask. Anything related to what people have said about stochastic interpolants, you can just try to ask the same thing for acceleration matching. If you're interested in reading the paper, it's going to come out tonight on arXiv. So yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So if you couple the distributions independently, this would have the undesirable property that if you have the time slices going to 0, then in order to interpolate between independent draws, you have to kind of zigzag all over the place, right? So how might you prevent that?
Can you say the question one more time?
Yeah. So if your time slices
if the gap between the times goes to 0,
then you're kind of re-randomizing at every step, so you're kind of zigzagging over the space. Right?
Yes. So one of the things I wanted to do was try to figure out how to do this when the number of marginals is large, which means the number of gaps is small. All the data sets right now are quite trivial, so I don't have a good answer for how to fix this. Like, you're talking about implementation-wise, right, or even mathematically?
Well, it would seem to me like you don't want to do an independent coupling in that case.
I mean, so that might be true, but I don't know what else. I mean, you can, if you need to do extra pre-processing, maybe it's possible, but I'm not entirely sure why, if you have many slices, this is not going to work, just because it wiggles around a little bit. Maybe it depends on the problem. I'm just not sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe like, I guess there's some, the hypothesis is there's some smooth underlying dynamics, and then you want something that's like closer to that, or like a better approximation of that.
I think, I mean, this will just give you maybe a smooth approximation. Whether or not it's the right one is another story. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, if you let's say you take the approach without the acceleration. If you are to iterate, this kind of like bridge matching stuff, you end up with like some Schrödinger bridge, and you know what is the OT problem behind that. Do you know what is the OT problem when you iterate actually acceleration matching?
So we're pretty sure this does give you the multi-marginal Schrödinger bridge problem if you iterate.
But so
you just have to do it correctly.
Okay, because I thought that like if you were to do the thing without the acceleration, you already recovered the multi-marginal OT. So like I'm just trying to understand where.
Yeah. So this passes through the kinetic OT formulation of the multi-marginal Schrödinger bridge problem. I think from that perspective, this is how they match.
Okay.
So what you said is true, but I think, yeah, we haven't worked that out yet, but I'm pretty sure that's how you should think about this. kinetic OT being just the OT problem, but on phase space. And then there's an equivalence between that and the multi-marginal Schrödinger bridge problem.
But can you write a cost function? Like, do you think you can have a cost
Yes.
function? Okay.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
would
yeah.
it be just L2, or?
No, it's super gross.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. There's some work by Giovanni, Yongshin.
The spline stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's how there's this equivalence. Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I thought like stochastic interpolant and flow matching, etc., are not optimal transport
They're not.
maps.
Yeah.
So why did you say that it'll solve the?
If you iterate. So if you okay, maybe this is it's quite orthogonal. I'm not going to go to the very beginning of this talk, but if you take the velocity field that you learned from stochastic interpolants, if you appropriately define the reverse process, and you use the marginal data that you to create synthetic data, and you replicate this process back and forth, then Valentin has some wonderful papers showing that you can recover the Schrödinger bridge between two marginals using this process.
I see.
Yeah. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, wonderful was the word.
I guess this would also solve Holden's problem. You can iterate to.
You can always iterate this. Yeah. If you want to improve it, you can. Yeah, that's another engineering task for Claude 10.9 or whatever. But yeah. Was there another question? I thought, yeah.
Question about, have you thought about adding friction to your dynamics?
Yeah, so we do all the math with friction. We didn't do any numerics with friction.
Oh, but you don't have friction in the...
I didn't put them in the slides,
I
no.
see.
But we in the, yeah.
Will be out tonight, they have friction.
Yeah. All the awful e to the minus gamma, whatever.
It will make it smoother, right?
Excuse me?
Presumably it will make it smoother?
Yeah, we found it. So I had some difficulty making the dynamics like not having blow up in the training algorithm. I think it's just because the choice of gamma is very sensitive. But again, I didn't try too hard. Everything worked with gamma equals 0. But yeah, we wrote everything with friction. Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Let's thank Aram-Alexandre one more time.
I just moved here.